So let me talk to you about screen time. What is screen time? We've heard a lot of parents saying my child has a long hour of screen time. We had some people saying that the whole day I have a bad screen time. So let me ask you, what is screen time? Hello all, I'm Mary Prezi, speech language pathologist at Sravana Speech and Hearing Center. Screen time is nothing but when we spend a lot of time in front of a media, per se computer, laptop, or even the mobile phone or the television, when we spend a lot of time, engaging in nothing else but simply watching what is there. That is what we call a screen time in simple terms. What really happens when screen time dominates over a child's actual speech and language skills? So, in my experience, a lot of parents have come to me and told me that we are working, so we can't really spend a lot of time with our child. So, we leave the child with a caregiver, and since the caregiver can't communicate in the same language as what my child wants, she puts the child in front of a television or a screen, per se, a mobile. Some other parents have told me feeding time is the most difficult time in the entire part of the child's life because feeding time is a challenge. The child does not want to eat anything, so the best way to distract him from the food which is there in front of him is just putting him in front of a screen. Yet some other parents have told me that screen time is a very easy way where my child learns a lot of language. So let me ask you, parents, as parents, is screen time going to improve your child's communication? What really happens in here? While your child is watching something on the screen, remember the child is so directed to what is happening there. It can be cartoons, it can be advertisements, it can be anything. The communication or the language which is put forth on the screen is exactly what your child is learning. Now, for very many parents, you all might have a doubt. So, isn't that good if my child learns a good set of language? But do you really understand if there is any form of interaction which is happening in here? No. There's a lot of children who are simply put in front of the screen and they don't even learn neither the language nor do they actually try to communicate whatever is there. Okay, so let me just ask you, the parents, y'all can just perform this very simple experiment and see. Put your son or your daughter, if they're 2, 3, 4, or 5 years, less than 5 years, just put them in front of the screen for 1 hour, okay, and just try calling out to them after an hour, after 60 minutes. See if they're responding to you. If yes, see what kind of responses do they give you. Do they try to imitate the character which is there, or do they try to give you some information about the whatever they're watching on the screen, or do they just try to respond to you by saying or any communicative word? So what really happens in here is the child is totally involved. There is very directive communication. The screen has pulled the attention of the child. So the brain starts functioning in a way that the language and the communication happens only in one direction, where the child gets a lot of information into the child's head, but the child is unable to express it or give it out as an information to the outside world. Now remember, when children are not able to express themselves, they're not able to give information of what they see in a screen, or they're not able to communicate appropriately with the people around them. Remember, there is a language barrier which is caused in here. When this language barrier is caused, the child automatically tries to retrieve from their communication environment. And eventually, the child will not want to really interact with the people around him or the child just move away. Another common thing that I've seen in my experience is very many times parents of children of 2 years, 3 years, 4 years come to me and tell me that my child has a significant speech and language delay. What do I really do about it? Do I expose them with a lot of language? Do I actually take them for speech therapy? Or do I just put them in a preschool or in a school and they try to just learn it automatically? Now here, there is a very huge impact to all the parents who are seeking out for these kind of services of, say, a preschool, of a speech therapy, or for a positive screen time, there is one tip that I want to really tell you all. The primary form to increase your child's speech and language skill is interaction. From the time their child was a baby, per se, a child was just 3 months or 6 months or 1 year, remember, you interacted enough with your child, and your interaction has to continue. The borderline or the line there does not stop communication, does not stop interaction. Your child is looking forward for you to communicate. Maybe in the earlier years, the child is trying to tell you that I want you to play with me, say a peekaboo or a ball game or whatever. But later, eventually, the play style moves to more of a pretend play. Now, what really happens if there is a screen time in here? There is a barrier which is being created. So, as parents, the one tip that I want to tell you is have an interactive screen time. Now, how do you have this interactive screen time? What do you do to get an interactive screen time? Primarily, when your child is put in front of a screen, always remember that the parent is very much responsible to not just the child watches on the screen, but also how the child responds to what he or she watches. Very, very easy example that children always follow. There's one cartoon called as the Peppa Pig. I think a lot of children do watch that. Or if it is on the internet, a series, you have Blippi. These are certain cartoons that children really enjoy, and I'm sure a lot of parents would always like your child to encourage your child to watch these kind of cartoons because it has a lot of language in it. So now what happens here when there is a series or when there is a cartoon which is being run, always remember that after your child watches the cartoon or the series for a minute or a half minute or even 1.5 minutes, pause. And probably you can try to interact with your child, asking him, can you imitate like what you see on the screen? Or can you try to say exactly what he's saying, and then I'll probably imitate like somebody else? So what happens here is there is an interaction, there is a time, the communicative barrier is removed off. For some children who is trying to pick up more of language, who's trying to develop on their speech, remember that a half an hour duration of screen time can have almost a 2-hour interaction with a parent. For some parents, this must be very challenging because of the time constraint that you have or because of the schedules that you have. But as a speech language pathologist, I always recommend you to have an interactive screen time, because this is something that I tell all my parents. You cannot stop screen time. You cannot tell your child you can't watch TV or you can't use the mobile phone for playing games. Can you? No. In the realistic situation, in the most practical situation, your child will definitely be involved in a lot of screen time. So remember, you can cut the screen time into parts, okay? And then you can also try to incorporate more of interacting, more of pretend play into your screen time duration. Now, for all of you who's watching this, I think the entire information that I gave all this while would have been helpful. Now, in your surroundings or in your family, you would have seen children who were, say, 2 years, 3 years, or 4 or 5, and still struggling to communicate. You would see children who are put in front of the screen, and just that they start imitating and speaking like the cartoon character. If you've seen those kind of children, then it's an alarming or a hazardous situation for that child's life. So you will have to come forward. You will have to get a counseling by a speech language pathologist, understand what is going wrong. In my experience, I've seen very many children coming up with a lot of autistic features when they're put in front of the screen for a long duration. Your child may not be on the spectrum always, but what if your child is at a risk of it? So do not avoid this kind of negative screen time. Do not avoid situations where you feel that the child is at risk of some particular problem and not communicating. Always seek help from a speech language pathologist. Get to know what is going wrong, and that can help the future of the child. Thank you.